Are you filled with fear, doubt, worry about the future of our country? Do you feel the urgency to act before it's too late? If yes, then this podcast is for you. It's time for us all to confront the critical issues threatening our nation's fabric, our democracy itself, irregardless of our political stance. If you're ready to face reality, handle the tough questions, and find real solutions, then here's your host, Debilyn Molineaux.
Welcome to the Terrified Nation podcast. I'm your host, Debilyn Molineaux. Can we save it? Because that's what we're exploring in this podcast series. And for me, the answer is, yes, we can. Not only that, but we must. Now, this show is where we explore alternatives to being afraid. And in the first 5 episodes, I offer a background framework that I really recommend you listen to because it provides a really good foundation of how we got here and, more importantly, how we can move forward. And now we're interviewing guests who have gone from being afraid or angry or hopeless to become advocates for our nation, to live into the promise of our founders. Each of us dedicating ourselves to a better future. So those of you who've listened for a while know that I like to start each show with a question that we'll explore together. And today's question is this: how do we make this nation work for all types of children and people? And today I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Berry. Now, Dr. Berry is a nationally recognized speaker, author, educator, and consultant. And she specializes in the education of culturally and linguistically diverse learners. And for more than 30 years, she has worked to strengthen academic achievement in majority of color, low wealth, large urban school districts. And she has been labeled as an equity warrior, which is a badge she wears proudly. Dr. Berry, welcome to the show, to the Terrified Nation.
Thank you for having me.
So, let me just ask first, how did you get into this work before we get into your preferred future interview?
Sure. Good question. I sort of stumbled into it. I was bound and determined to be a lawyer when I went to college. That didn't work out. So I was going to stay in the political arena until I realized I was going to have to job hunt every 4 years. And my mother made me take the state teacher's exam in order to move home and live for free for a bit after college until I figured out what I was going to do. Ultimately, I dusted off that teaching credential and started teaching. But I saw so many things that were, let's say, broken with our K-12 public education system that it was frustrating and children were not getting what they needed or what they deserved. So I went to I stayed in the education space, but into the private sector. And then just one thing after another led me down this path to where I am today. And that is, as an independent person, really working to strengthen the education system for all children that are in it, K-12, but to also make sure that our children that are historically marginalized have the opportunities that are promised to all Americans, so that they can be successful at whatever it is they choose to do.
You know, one of the things I think is really fascinating about your story is that there are people who work to change from within the system. And I think they are heroes
Yes.
to work within bureaucracies as they're currently set up. But there are also the need for outside consultants and agitators, if you will, to put pressure on the system from the outside. And I really admire the work, being an outsider myself, trying to pressure the system from the outside. I think it's a marvelous place to be, and nice to have you on the show.
It is a good place to be. And I don't know that anyone's called me an agitator before, but I kind of like it.
Well, it's an agitation for change is what I like to think of it as.
It is. It is. Nothing comes, what is the saying? Nobody likes change except for babies with dirty diapers.
I haven't heard that one before, but I'm going to steal it.
Steal it. I stole it from someone else, and I'm probably not saying it right, but everything else does require some agitation. Yeah.
It really does. It really does. And that's part of what a preferred future interview is also for our guests here on Terrified Nation. Because it's part of a research project to imagine a future that we actually want for ourselves, not the dystopian or, catastrophic options, if you will, that are presented to us. So we're going to take a little adventure into your future. And we're going to do this with a little campy time machine. And we're going to talk about what you prefer. It's not what you think is possible or probable or likely, but what you actually want. So we recommend that we travel somewhere between 2 and 20 years. What sounds right for you?
Let's say 7. That's a good number for me.
7 years. All right. We're going to crank up the time machine. Let's get in the time capsule here and crank it to 20. Let me have to do the math. 2033. No, 2031. 2031.
Yep.
Okay. So we're going to go to 2031 and into 2031. When we get there, would love to have you remain your current self and observing your future self. So a little split screen here of current modern day and future self. Any questions?
Nope.
All right. So here we are. We're pulling into the 2031 station. Ding! And I told you it was campy. And as we climb out of the time capsule, I think the first question that I ask is like, where are we in 2031?
In 2031, I am on a beautiful island somewhere in the Caribbean.
A Caribbean dream. I love the Caribbean.
Sunshine, blue skies, 365 days of glorious weather, tropical forest, peace, nature.
And anything about other people there, or are you by yourself?
I am with other people. Of course, I'd be with my husband, not the kids. The adult children can stay where they are. But hey, got to cut those apron strings sometime. But a neighborhood that's filled with people from every part of the world, from diverse backgrounds, speaking different languages, all sort of looking for that same environment that is peaceful, serene, welcoming.
Yeah, that just sounds lovely. I have several friends who are expats now down to Costa Rica.
Yeah.
Looking for that same thing. It's a beautiful dream. But as you look at your future self here in 7 years, what do you observe that you're most proud of?
In 7 years, so we can start with, I definitely will be at the Social Security age. So I'm looking back on a very full life and a full career. I think most proud, I'll say the sort of the ripple effect or whatever of having worked with school systems across, who knows by then, if I'm right now at 44, 45 states, probably with, every state in the nation with U.S. territories and the hundreds, if not thousands of children, honestly, maybe some of their children by that time, who have hopefully had a better education and educational journey through our public school system because of the work that I've done with the countless numbers of teachers, and that practices that I have taught teachers to use and that I've written about and that I've podcast about, that those things have been put into place and that the impact on children has been positive. That would be the thing that I'm most proud of.
That's really lovely. And just remember, this is your preferred future, so you can really make up anything you want.
Well, then let's see, I can adjust it and say I will have worked in all 50 of the United States, plus all the English-speaking Caribbean countries and Canada. I've already worked in Canada. So I could tick off all 50 states by then.
Yeah. All right. It's a bucket list worthy of a better future.
Yeah.
So as you're spending time here in your Caribbean community, how will you spend your day?
Well, I doubt that I would be able to keep myself completely out of an elementary school here or there. So I would love, I would spend each day well, or at least a portion of each day, reading to children in a school. One of my favorite things is story time, and it doesn't matter if they're kindergartners or they're high schoolers. Read aloud to me it brings me joy, and I've seen the joy that it brings to so many children who don't have access to literacy and to quality literature at home. So that would bring me joy. I'd probably spend at least 3 days a week on a stand-up paddleboard somewhere, getting a little sunshine and water time, and spend some time every day to reflect. I want to be able to have the time, or I will have, because this is my preference, I will have the time to read, to reflect, to just sit and think, to have meaningful, unrushed conversations with, people at the coffee shop or just the neighbor next door. Just time, space. Yeah. And I'll probably still podcast maybe once every month as a guest on the show that I started. I don't know.
Okay.
But that would be nice. I'd like to still dabble here and there. And I will probably still do a little bit of writing. So that ought to keep me busy.
That sounds pretty full. I wonder if you have time for your husband?
Sure. Oh, he'll be on the shore while I'm doing the paddle boarding, and we'll ride around in our little golf cart, little souped up golf cart. We make time even with the crazy schedules that we have. We still make time for each other. But
And I'm
yeah,
imagining he'll have his own activities that he's doing too while you're reading to school children, etc.
probably sitting in the cafe drinking a cup of coffee and reading a newspaper.
Ah, oh yes.
Yeah, chill
Well,
time.
chill time, lots of chill time.
Yeah, yeah.
So how do you observe your future self feeling most of the time?
Calm. Something that I don't get to enjoy right now.
Mm,
So my future self gets to have calm and peace every day.
I love that too. That's actually a very popular answer right now.
Yeah,
I can just share that with you. You have a lot of people are looking for peace and calm right now.
yeah, yeah.
So what do you observe as your 3 to 5, I'm going to call them priority values, but you might use qualities as another word.
Okay. I would say number one would be health. It's important to me now. It's sometimes difficult to find the time. So my future self gets to prioritize her health. That's the stand-up paddleboard 3 times a week. That's the time to reflect. That's, just taking care of myself as a priority. That would be number one. Number two priority is lifelong learning. My future self will be able to pick and choose what she gets to read, wants to read, not have to read to stay on top of all the research and everything else, but to have choice, because current self and future self loves to read, but future self gets a little more choice there. And then I think the third thing, going back to that, almost that same thing, prioritizing quality time to reflect, to rest, to engage with people in a social manner without a business agenda behind it.
Humans first.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're coming into the home stretch here. We've got 2 questions left. And this next question is really to look around at the community in your preferred future. And what does that community need to include or provide for your preferred future to be possible?
I'm trying to find the way to state what they would provide. Maybe to say it this way, they would provide a place that is free of hate, a place where everyone is seen as a human being, where everyone has value and worth. I don't need a lot.
Well, I
but I
hear,
need that.
yeah, well, and I hear that as actually different social norms than what we have today. So,
Absolutely.
so the community itself needs to evolve to a place where the social norms have shifted, prioritizing, I would call it human dignity
Yeah.
first
Yeah.
over everything else.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, I am not opposed to capitalism, but it would be nice for people to be in a space in that future where that does not dictate every aspect of our lives and of our community.
Yeah. I've actually started a series of conversations that I'll come back around to in a minute on democracy and capitalism right
Mhm.
now. I'm going to like pull us back into 2024 because this last question is really about, is there anything that you are doing or can do today or in the near future to influence or co-create that community? And feel free to like talk more about your current work and invite people to listen to your podcast, et cetera.
Sure. So I think the biggest voice I have is, this platform that you have as well, and that is through podcasting, where I talk about right now we're focused on the intersection of education and politics because so much of what's happening in our schools is being ruled by a body politic that does not put the education and well-being of children first. And so everything I do right now in my professional world is about developing equitable systems and having people become aware of what inequity is and what racism and bias are and how they impact not just children of color, but every single child that sits in a classroom, whether they are the object of that bias, that hate, that racism, or it's a friend of theirs that is. A lot of times people don't think about how other children are impacted by racism. We'll just call it that. Um, but they are.
Mhm.
Our children do not see the world through a lens of hate until they are taught to. And if we catch them early enough, they know to push back when that teaching comes along. So what I do, not just through my podcast and the books that I write, in the workshops that I provide, is to really get people to view the world through a lens of multiple equity indicators. And I won't dive into that; those are covered on the show and in books. But to recognize where there are challenges and then work to fix them, to correct them, whether it's your own behavior or being confident enough and feeling safe enough to call out that behavior in other people when they see it. So I can get my voice out there. I can do the workshops, but the work is not easy. And so the other thing that I am doing is mentoring and supporting other people. And I want to say other women because at this point they are all women. We are strong, but other women who want to do the work, maybe aren't sure how to go about it or they're facing challenges of their own. So that mentorship that I provide for, I used to say a handful, but now it's two hands full, of women who are looking forward to continuing the work on this path. Like I said, I will be, in 7 years, I will be well along my way of collecting Social Security checks. So and sure I could continue to work forever, but I think it's important that we mentor and support and help bring up the next generation of people to carry on the work before we work ourselves to death or into our graves and we haven't taught someone else to carry on. So it's really important to me. I was raised with an understanding of a concept of the talented 10th. And among Black people, that meant that there were about 10% of us who would be able to do things to where we could reach back into our communities and help others. This is my reaching back into our communities and helping others to do the work moving forward, helping women who are And again, nothing against men. It just happens to be that it's all women, helping women who are working on their doctorates and navigating that path, not just the academic path, but the political path and the psychological path of doing that work, which is time consuming and grueling. Helping others who are starting their careers and facing challenges of bias and racism and discrimination in their workplace, and helping them be really sometimes just being a sounding board for, is this something I should do in the workplace? Is this something I can push back against? What do I do? Or do I just quit and move on? So everything I can do along those lines, in addition to the regular for pay work, that's what I'm trying to do to set that world up and to make that a future to where, in 7 years, I can look back and say, I done good.
So have you heard about the neuroscience research surrounding the feeling of awe and wonder?
No.
They are showing that if we can spend even 5 minutes a day in awe and wonder, that we actually become happier people. And I'm marrying that with this invitation for people who think about their preferred future to spend 5 minutes a day thinking about their preferred future with awe and wonder, because we will start to subconsciously make decisions in alignment with what we want for the future. Mm-hmm. And it is a great, low barrier way to actually get out of this mess that we're in culturally right now, where we keep repeating the same patterns over and over again. And so that's awesome. I leave that as an invitation for you to think about 5 minutes a day.
Well, I think I love it. I'm glad to know there's science behind it, because that's kind of what I do every day when I take my brief afternoon respite and give my brain time to calm down and regroup and categorize and catalog everything that's gone on, and think about, what do I want to do? Or what's my life going to, I do a little of what's my life going to look like in 2 years? It's something that I do. And very often before I get out of bed in the morning, just to spend 10 minutes thinking about what is good in my world. Mm-hmm. And getting into that space of feeling good about what's good in my world, and making sure that I hold on to that, because very often our days sort of spiral out of control, and we need something to reflect back on. So,
and the gratitude practice has helped me personally tremendously as well, to hold that essence, if you will, of to not fall into despair. At the state of the world. Well, we are at the end of our interview. Do you have an invitation of how people can interact with you? What's your podcast?
So my podcast is Educational Equity Emancipation, and you can find it pretty much on any podcast platform. On social media, I am at Almitra Berry on LinkedIn, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. I was going to say I'm missing one, and YouTube. So that's me. I always say my daddy gave me this name, and it's been hard to hide ever since. So, yeah.
All right. Well, Dr. Almitra Berry, thank you so much for sharing your preferred future with Terrified Nation and providing your work in education and specifically working with school districts in all 50 states plus the territories as your contribution to help us get the future we want.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been a stretch and a pleasure.
And if you, the listeners, would like to participate in this national research project, please visit americanfuture.us and click the self-interview button. In closing today's show, I'd like to thank you, the listeners, for giving a damn about our nation. We may be a terrified nation today, but we can do better. We can save the USA. Join me next time.
So that's it for today's episode of Terrified Nation. Head on over to iTunes or wherever you listen and subscribe to the show. One lucky listener every single week who posts a review on iTunes will win a chance in the grand prize drawing to win a $15,000 private VIP day with Debilyn Molineaux herself. Be sure to head on over to terrifiednationpodcast.com and pick up a free copy of Debilyn's gift and join us on the next episode.